Today I'm going to walk you through how I upgraded my workshop, all thanks to my friends over at Ryobi. I was not using the space to the fullest in this half of my workshop. I just had a fear of cluttering it, but I need to get over it. So first things first, we're going to take everything off of this wall, everything off of my workshop table as well. I have done a video on these shelves before, so I'm not going to walk you through how I just upgraded to a longer one. I'm just going to link that tutorial for you. I essentially did the exact same thing with the exact same brackets, just to a longer piece of wood at the top. I went ahead and found the studs in my wall and just kind of framed out with 1x4s an area that I would like to add a pegboard. And the reason that you want to put some 1x4s or some type of spacing in between the wall and the pegboard is you will not be able to hook anything into the pegboard piece if there is no space. Before hanging up my pegboard, I decided to cut a slit for the brackets. That way I can just kind of shimmy it up and the pegboard can be flush to where I want it. This is where my attention to detail kind of bothered me. I could see that natural wood through the pegboard piece before I hung it up, so I decided to paint that wood white. You don't have to. I did because I just didn't like the look of the wood through the holes. When that was dry, I went ahead and just screwed the pegboard in directly into the wood that we just painted. If you are working alone like me, you can screw one screw through the middle and kind of work your way out to the sides. You can get creative with this whole process, make the pegboard larger, smaller, a different shape. It's totally up to you, but the next step is just putting all the things that you want to use and display onto that pegboard. I'm going to save this portion for the reveal. We're going to move into upgrading my workshop table. Now, I do not have a tutorial for this workshop table because this was my first large build, but I am going to be showing you how to use a circular saw to create shelving right in this little area down below. I'm going to be making two extremely simple shelves, and that's just going to be by supporting a piece of plywood on each side of the table with a skinnier piece of scrap wood. I'm making this out of wood I just have laying around. Right now, all I'm doing is measuring the depth and the width of the shelves I would like to create, and obviously yours will be a little bit different than mine, so I'm not going to really go into detail about all these measurements, but I am going to transfer those over to the pieces of wood I need to cut down with our Ryobi circular saw. I gathered up my 2x4s, 1x4, and my plywood, and then my longer ruler, speed square, measuring tape, safety glasses, some construction screws, wood screws, clamps. I forgot that you are going to need a level as well. For a full detailed list of the materials I'm using, plus the Ryobi power tools, I have linked them all in the description box down below for you. But let's move into learning more about how to use a circular saw, because I know a lot of you want to get into power tools, but table saws are very scary. This Ryobi circular saw is perfect for beginners. I'm going to show you just how easy it is to use. All of my tools are battery operated. I don't have anyone with a wire just because I like the freedom to move around and not be tied down to a plug. First thing you may notice is that there is a blade protector, and that will automatically retract as you push your Ryobi circular saw through your wood, and once it is completely all the way through your wood, that protector will fall right back down so you can rest your circular saw and continue to work. There is a dial on the back where you can adjust the depth of your blade, and this is important. We're going to get into it when we're actually up against a piece of wood though, and I'll explain that in more detail. There is also a knob towards the front of the saw that you can adjust the bevel on. I personally don't really use this just because I don't have a ton of experience, but if you wanted to do a bevel cut, you definitely can by adjusting this. Last but not least, at the top where the handle is, there is a trigger that you need to press in and then press the button underneath in order for the circular saw to be powered on, which I love because sometimes, truth be told, I'll pick up the saw and my finger might hit the trigger, but it doesn't go off because you're not pressing the other safety lock in first. Anytime you're cutting wood, I know people say measure twice then cut once. I measure about 5,000 times and then I cut, and most of the time I cut wrong. So I like to measure then remeasure and even mark a little arrow on the side of the line that I need to be cutting, just because my mind gets that scrambled up. I then go in with my speed square or a long straight edge depending on what we're measuring and just make a straight line across that measurement so I know where to cut. I personally like to lift my wood up with another piece of scrap wood and then clamp that piece of wood, then the actual piece that I am cutting, to the table for extra security so it does not wiggle or move. Before cutting anything with your circular saw, you want to ensure that your finger is off the trigger and that you hold the circular saw up to your wood and adjust it so that the blade is sticking out not even 1/4 of an inch. And this is because if you set the blade too deep, there's a higher chance for the saw to kick back, which is just super scary and totally, it's just not fun. So be sure that you are properly adjusting your blade every time. A random thing I have learned while using my Ryobi circular saw is that if you feel uncomfortable, like maybe your clamps are too close to where you're cutting, take a second before you cut and just adjust your clamps, pull out the wood a little bit more, and ensure that you have more than enough space to let that wood fall off, but also enough space so your circular saw doesn't jam you up when you try to push through. Our first piece of wood is clamped and good to go, but do not forget your eyes, your ears, and even a mask because there are glue particles in plywood that you do not need to be breathing in. When you line up your circular saw, there are 2 notches. One says 0, one says 45. The one we will be cutting with as our guide is the 0 notch, and that's because it's just a straight cut. If you're doing bevel cuts, you would line up your mark with the 45 notch, which is further in. For smaller cuts like this, I don't feel comfortable like cutting a straight line, so I use my speed square and hold it up against the motor side of the circular saw and hold down nice and tight. You can even clamp it as well and push my saw naturally through the wood and let the runoff fall to the floor freely. You do not need to be supporting both sides because if you do, you might pinch the wood and the saw will kick back. I'm going to be repeating that exact same process to the 2x4, so you want to make sure that the wood is clamped down to the table nice and secure. Adjust your blade's depth to be just barely poking out the other side of the thickness of the wood. The motor should be facing the longer piece of your wood, the longer portion of your wood. The smaller side, or the side that you are cutting off, should not be supported, so it shouldn't be pinching and kicking the saw back. It should be able to fall away freely. You can definitely use a table saw or a miter saw, but I really wanted to show you how a circular saw is a great starter saw, and it's not as intimidating, but it can get a ton of projects done. Moving on to making longer cuts with my Ryobi circular saw, it's the exact same process. I'm going to be making this long cut on my plywood for my actual, like the shell portion of the shelves. Measure and mark everything per your measurements onto this piece of wood. Connect the lines with a long straight edge. When I am working on one piece, like if it's a shelf and it needs to be cut twice, I like making both marks now. That way I can just cut both marks and move on to the next piece. There are different blades for different jobs. This whole job I'm using a 24 teeth blade. If you want a finishing cut, you do want to get a blade that has more teeth. As far as actually cutting longer cuts, you can use that long rule that you saw before. You can clamp that down and use that as a guide on the side that you are not cutting off. Or you can do what I do, and I do it by hand with a very simple push through, nice and patient, and I allow my laser to follow the mark that I made and for the excess to fall and hit the floor. That's just a quick one-on-one tool time talk with you guys. I hope that you found these little tips and tricks for a circular saw helpful and that you guys give it a go. I linked it down below for you as well, where you can pick a Ryobi one up like I have. Now let's get to actually building out the shelves that we just cut down. For the remainder of the project, I'm going to be using my Ryobi power drill and some wood screws. I'm taking my smallest pieces, I'm just building one shelf right now, and I'm attaching it so it is level on each side. So per one shelf, there will be 2 support pieces. Before screwing anything in, you do want to place your level and ensure that that bubble is in the middle and it is good to go because you do not want your shelves being wonky. I measured this side to ensure that the other side will be equidistant from the base of the workshop table to the actual first shelf. I screwed one side into one leg of the workshop table and then took that 2x4 we cut down and shimmied it into place, checking that it was nice and straight with my speed square, and then supporting it, like actually making sure it's staying in place by drilling through the top of my workshop table and the bottom. Once that was secured in, I just ensured that the other portion of the shelf support was level and screwed it in, and then I slid that plywood piece that we cut down, those long cuts with our Ryobi circular saw, I just slid it right into place. I'm repeating that exact same thing to my second shelf. Once I stepped back, I realized that these shelves most likely will sag in the middle, so to prevent that, I added a 2x4 in the center on the outside of both of these shelves, and then I drilled in a support piece since I already put everything together and I just am working with what I have. I drilled in a square dowel support piece directly underneath each shelf, that way when anything rests on it, it doesn't sag and break. To clean this guy up just a little bit, I had some trim pieces on hand. I cut those down to size with my circular saw, how I showed you before, and I just used my Ryobi nail gun to secure them into place. I rolled this baby into place and ooh, does she look so good. I ended up just using the storage to what fits my personal needs, but you can do whatever fits yours, obviously. I put some scrap wood or pieces of wood that I tend to reach for a lot in projects on one shelf. I added decorative storage, thing that you may or may not recognize from my office, for my extension cords and different pieces of pipes and things that I don't really have a place for. Last but not least, the most important part is adding more tools that I cannot wait to show you how to use, but I didn't have space for these guys. I decided to place them, aesthetically pleasing on these shelves as well. Now all we have to do is put our tools back in place in their new home. Look at the before, which is not as good as the after. And there you guys have it. That is how I upgraded a portion of my workshop, all thanks to my family over at Ryobi. Even though there are power tools on this wall and it is full of all the accessories that I use to build, I do like slipping in small little details like that skateboard that says go get him, or this DIY iron signs, different paint buckets that I use as well. I just ripped the labels off to make more aesthetically pleasing. But if it's your workshop, obviously it's your aesthetic, and this is what matches mine. But gosh, do I love seeing that green everywhere. I hope that you guys enjoyed upgrading some of my workshop with me, and again, it's all thanks to Ryobi, which I'm so excited. You guys need to head over to my Instagram, like this photo, do what it says in the comments, subscribe to Ryobi here on YouTube and myself, and follow Ryobi and I on Instagram. I've linked everything down below for you, and you guys can win one of the first things I ever got from Ryobi, which was a starter kit, which includes this circular saw and power drill that I use. So head over, see all of the other things that this kit has, and good luck to everyone that is entering. I will catch you Sunday with another DIY.